just give us 20 seconds to read this. Okay, so you go, Kelly. You're in charge.
Always. So these are George's and I's LinkedIn profiles. If you want to connect with us on LinkedIn, feel free to scan those codes and send us a message request or a connect request. And also, George, we haven't put the GISA code for our GISA page. We have a LinkedIn page. So if you're not already following our LinkedIn page, you should. We don't go nuts on the page, but we do put important things on there. So it's good to stay informed. And George, next slide. Bit of housekeeping. You get 1 FPEP point for every hour you attend this seminar, and you get a WA1 and you get some for GCA. So it's generally 1 point for every hour that you're here. We prefer it if you keep your cameras on because it's nice to have people to talk to rather than circles with initials. But if you don't want to, you also don't need to. If you're dialing in on your phone and you get a call, please hang up and take your call and then come back to the meeting rather than put us on hold because we will get the hold music. This is a live Q&A, so if you want to interrupt George at any time, just take yourself off mute and interrupt, or you can pop something in the chat and I'll interrupt him on your behalf. And then we also will be doing live polling using Mentees, which you've already started. So every now and then George will stop and ask a question or double check on something, and you can answer that via a poll. And just a bit of an intro. For those who don't know me, I am Kelly and I have a background in the spatial industry, not technical, but I was in the industry association for many years. And that's where I came across D-SPEC and A-SPEC and everything else spec and George. And now I help George with these forums in terms of project managing and helping him promote and we work with venues to events to pull this forum together every year. And George is the director of GISA and founder of A-SPEC. And next slide, George.
Yep. Just an update. I forgot to update this slide, but if you're a GCA member, they have offered 1.25 points for attending this particular session or all the sessions. So it's per session, whereas the Surveyors Registration Board and the the Licensed Surveyors Board in WA is 1 point per hour.
Licensed Surveyor, LSLB, Licensed Surveyor Legislation Board. Okay, yeah. In the forum, we're going to cover off the what's so right now. So clarifications and interpretations, community experiences. So we're going to share community experiences from the community, some tech tips, and what's next and where to now. So over to you, George, to do the presentations.
Yep, thanks, Kelly, and again, good morning, everyone. My name's George Havakis, and I'm the Managing Director of GISA International. And you've just been experiencing Kelly being our wonderful MC, and this is your 6th year now, is that right, Kelly? Your 6th lot of online forums?
Yeah, maybe. Who's counting?
Time flies when you're having fun. So community experiences is also about sharing experiences from people who have participated in the community, and so we've got 2 special guests today, Brenton McDonald from Wannon Water and Brenton O'Rourke from Civil Now. And so we'll hear from them a bit later. So we've got a couple of more polls now that we've warmed you up. This is specific to the delivery of data. So this one pertains to you if you're a data supplier. Which version are you supplying data in? Please go to your QR code or popmenti.com and use the code in your browser. Great. Okay, 2019. Yes, 2019 is still very valid. However, there are a lot more features in 2023 that have been agreed to by the community. So the sooner we have everybody participating in 2023, the more efficient we can be with the delivery of data.
And George, Greg said that he hasn't needed to supply data for S-SPEC and W-SPEC yet.
Yep, cool, understand. So it could be, okay, thanks very much, Greg, for that. And it may just not be for S&W-Spec, but yeah, I get it. So if you're an asset owner, so yep, great. I know we've got a few asset owners here, a mix of councils and authorities. So yeah, please complete this. Okay, so the polls are running live in the background. So at any time you start, you can participate and catch up. All right. So there's a number of activities that we've been undertaking, and whilst we mention anomalies, it's also about future-proofing. Some of the examples that I'm going to show you are the kind of things that we've addressed. And I went over the video recordings from last year because, as you probably know, I wasn't here, and we started looking at, you know, minor impact, medium impact, you know, impact sort of thing. And it's like, to us, there's either an impact or there isn't an impact. So we've condensed that down to minor and important. And I'll give you some examples of that. We've updated the sample data, and that will be posted onto the website by what are we now? By the end of this month. And so you can look out for that. I'm going to talk quite a bit about codes and what we've been doing about updating codes and the code lists. We've been working on the code list API, which we've mentioned last year. We've had to rebuild it because we've moved platforms and it's taken slower. It's been slower than what we've expected. So in the meantime, I went on and had a bit of a dabble with AI, and through a product called Claude AI, and I developed a code generating tool, which I'll show. So if you've been to other forums, you'll see it again. But if you're new to this, if this is your first forum in our series, then you'll get to have a look at it. There's a much greater focus now on advocating on governance and outlining from our perspective what we believe the benefits are. I'm going to talk quite a bit about that as well. And I've got a case study of of how we've used checklists, for example, with one of our clients, Central Coast Council. Now, one of the things about identifying what we've been doing is that on the website, if you have a login, then you can go onto the website and go onto, you can search for A-SPEC proposed changes, or go to the A-SPEC online menu tab and then click on A-SPEC proposed changes, and you'll see this table. And you'll see a couple of documents here: A-SPEC version 5 consolidated changes and A-SPEC addendum. So the A-SPEC version 5 consolidated changes is to assist you from identifying all of the changes in the one document across all the specifications. So if that's of interest to you, go there. What we also found was that there was a number of anomalies that were identified by the user community as well as GISA. So we put out an addendum in last year, January last year. In the lead up to these forums, I went through all of the documents again, and so I've been presenting some more anomalies, as I spoke about, that may have minor impact or may have an impact. And so that will be presented in a document as well at the end of this month, and a notification sent out to everybody about that. Okay, so moving on to information about codes. So our intention and our responsibility is to manage one code list register, harmonized across all specifications. So when we mean harmonized, we mean that if you have a term that's concrete, then the abbreviation for that term is used across all of the specifications. So these particular terms are really important. And so we investigated if there are codes created specifically for 2019 versions, the 2019 version of the specs that are not compatible with 2023, and we can confirm that they are all compatible. In fact, one of the important things to know is that if you're continuing to use 2019 versions, typically all future changes to codes are also relevant to 2019. So this particular example that I'm showing on the screen demonstrates the importance of staying familiar with the codes. So on the left is what was published in 2023, and on the right is what is current as of 2021. So the codes, whatever is published at the time that the documents are released, is a snapshot in time. You'll very rarely see many changes to attributes, but we have often changes to the codes. New features appear, new things are wanting to be recorded. So these are communicated to us, and we will add them into the code list. So on this particular example, the feature type, you can see everything that's in yellow highlight, which is our color throughout the specifications. It shows adjustments or modifications that they have been added to that feature type code. There will be an updated version of the master code list, and that'll also be updated to the website by the end of this month. So that's post the showcase. Reviewing for anomalies is always ongoing. Here's examples of what we consider the future proofing and for continuous improvement. So there'll be modifying descriptions for codes. Yeah, minor impact, so low impacted delivery. And so the table on the left, the pipe stiffness class, what we've done is that we've just changed the description in that particular case, has not changed the deliverable. It's more about providing more detail about what that code relates to. Now, you'll notice that we've said removed code list and low impacted delivery. what we identified is that this particular code list is not linked to any attribute in W-SPEC. So it's a legacy artifact, and so it's one of the things that we're doing going throughout all of our specifications to make sure that we're not causing more work for people than what is necessary. So this particular code list is being removed. Not will be, is being. Now, getting on to code generator, and I'm just going to turn I've got a video clip that I've created here, and I'm going to turn my camera off to save my bandwidth. So this is a tool that we've developed using AI. I was pretty proud of myself. I went in there and talked about the logic, and essentially this is about empowering the community through crowdsourcing codes, not code lists, but the codes within particular code lists. So as well as empowering the community, we also wanted to save time and effort by the codes being able to be generated at the time. Now, within the video, you'll notice that there's a comment about we want to remove C comment as an entry. Now, after I showed this in our first forum, we had a very robust discussion with some of the more experienced practitioners, and who said, well, is it going to cause a delay because the tools that are out in the marketplace like ACDC and GDV Hub won't have the codes available or won't have the codes updated in time. And so what we agreed on was that the C comment field is still a relevant code to use. What we want to do is combine that with the user creating the code and adding it into the comments field. And that way we get the best of both worlds. So what I'm going to do now is fire up this video, and Kelly, if you could let me know if you hear the sound. As you know, there'll be a delay for a few seconds, and then the sound will come up. The purpose of this clip is to give you a snapshot into what we're looking at for crowdsourcing the creation of codes. As you know, C comment is one of the valid entries. We want to remove it. In doing that, we also want to give the community an opportunity to create the codes when they need them. So this is how it would work. You search for a code list. I've selected my code list. I'm looking at all of the different options that are available. And I can't find it. So I'm going to search something in there. Vegetable plantings. Vegetable plantings doesn't exist. By selecting this, it automatically reads a description and at the same time gives me a couple of options. I'm going to pick one of them, and it's based on this criteria highlighted below. I pick one of them. I put in my username or user ID, and this is so that we can have an indication of where the activity is coming from. And we add a code to a code list. We continue. I now have the option to add more. I'm going to select make more changes. I go back to the start. I'm going to search for a different code, access point material. I'm looking through my access point material to see what is there, and I'm going to reinforced concrete, and by typing that in,
I can see all of the options that I've got for reinforced concrete. I know that RC already exists. So I'm going to select RC1. This automatically adds it to the code list. I now see all of the changes. Satisfied with that, I send an email notification to GISA. GISA receives an email with these changes. I send the email, the session's complete.
Okay, so a couple of points. One is there may be a question in the group to say, well, does GISA need to ratify it before we use it? The answer is no. When we receive the notification, we'll of course go through to make sure that people are not unnecessarily creating any duplication, through potato or potato as an example, with ending in O or ending in OE. If we find that there is a conflict with something that already exists, then we'll notify the creator and we'll endeavor to notify the end user of who will receive that data as well. And that way we can keep the wheels in motion. But our sense of it is that we want to create an environment that enables the community to create what they need when they need it. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to put in the chat or raise your hand and take yourself off mute. Okay, so now I'm going to show you some examples where we believe there is going to be an impacted delivery. Now, this was brought up last year thanks to Brenton raising it out of reviewing some capture about pressure settings. And I'm bringing it up again because Brenton outlined to us that the way that it was before, we put in nominal and we had pressure setting of the valve in kilopascals, was it could have been interpreted to record the actual operating pressure versus maintaining a record of the design pressure rating. So it was recommended and suggested that we put in nominal and remove setting, and so that's what we've done. And so I put this up here because that would have an impacted delivery if the interpretation was that you had to record the actual operating pressure, which is not the intention of A-SPEC at this point in time. The other thing that we found was that we had a missing attribute in the fittings table. And in this particular case, it was quite important because we found that the unique ID was missing. So that is now being included and will be communicated to everybody outside of these forums. Continuing with impacted delivery, in this particular instance, another suggestion was that this particular attribute existed in the valves table for W-SPEC. However, it didn't exist in the valves table for S-SPEC. So we've taken that on and we're adopting it, and it'll be included as part of modification to the S-SPEC specification. Now, the second example is really an adjustment made by GISA to clarify expectations. We have node number, and what we've got for the description of it is a number only needs to be allocated if the fitting is a reducer. So essentially, it's a conditional field. If it's not a reducer, then really everything else is NA. So we're continuing to explore that and happy to receive some comment about, what if, yes, but what if? And so feel free to put your hand up, make a comment, and happy to open it up in discussion. In this particular example, we're asking specifically for feedback from this particular forum as a starting point, and then depending on the level of interest, we'll expand it. We may expand it to the broader community. In W-SPEC, we currently have, along with metadata, we collect attributes for cathodic protection. And the list of attributes that I've got shown there is what's there. The diagram that appears in W-SPEC is of a rectangle around a particular pipe, in this instance, that shows that there's cathodic protection in that region around the pipe. So the purpose of this conversation is to gauge the interest of this community to break this area down as we have with pumping station sites. That is, do we want to see this as a site and then another table and then the assets within the site captured and recorded? So to do that, you'll see we've got a head with our cog, which means we've got a Menti coming up. So we'll go straight into the Menti, and please respond to this. Okay, so far we've got 100% stating yes. All right. So you don't need to disclose who you are, but considering, okay, well that's not a no. So that's just as good. So thank you for making those responses. So just as a follow-on to this particular slide, we now have, I'll start this Menti. Just off the top of your head, and this will be for an offline conversation so we can explore it further, what kind of components would you request capture for within within a cathodic protection area? And as I mentioned, now that we've seen some interest, we will canvass the whole community about this and see where it progresses, whether it comes to fruition or not. And I guess for this really comes back to the asset managers to get a sense of what do you componentize in your asset management system. And Brenton, I'd also be interested in potential inputs from your end, being formerly at Wannon Water, if that was discussed at your time at Wannon or not. And no doubt we'll get some feedback from Brendan as well.
Yeah, I had some very passionate colleagues in regards to cathodic protection. I wasn't heavily involved in the management of that component of the network, but they did capture and analyse and assess in quite detail for a couple of the main pipelines for Wannon Water from the Otways. Mm-hmm. Not sure whether Brendan's had any more work in that space of recent times, but
I think we've had a bit of a changeover, so I think those people have sort of moved on. But yeah, we've got those legacy componentization. So it's sort of, does the organisation want to continue with them or not? So yeah, I can chat to you, George, about that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It'd be intriguing too, George, as to how it's applied and whether it's a part of major capital works projects or their internal operation type works to facilitate the recording of this type of information. Contractors and their capacity to install things and the gap between their knowledge of those said things and their workings are two aspects that are probably different things. So
yeah, definitely worth exploring further. Well, I won't stay on this point too long, but thank you both for your contribution to that conversation. All right, FAQs. Each forum, in between forums, we've got typically a 10 to 12 month span. So I endeavour to capture some of the frequently asked questions that occurred. So there are some that are specific to S&W, but there are others that are just generic across the specifications. So and if you've been to other forums this year, then you would have seen these responses as well. So this is the first one. This came up at a forum last week. An interesting comment by one of the participants. What's the point of having a standard if it's always changing? So I created this actually 2 forums ago. Apologies, because I created this statement for last forum. So this is the statement from GISA that I'll give you a little bit of time just to go through. And if you have any questions, again, don't hesitate to put into the chat or take yourself off mute and make a comment. One of the key things that we differentiated with a particular participant that brought this up was to outline to them that for the most part, the attributes, once they're published, do not change. If there are some anomalies that we've identified, we've omitted, like I've shown previously that we've omitted an attribute unintentionally, or an additional attribute may create some clarification, then we'll do that as a minor change, but we're very mindful that the impact that has on everyone, not just the end user, but also of the people that are the data providers and the software vendors that are creating the tools around everything from data creation to data validation. However, the code lists are dynamic. We do see regular changes. Some weeks it's quite substantial, and then it'll be quiet for a period of time. So we need that ability to change things to create that robustness. This question came up tail end of last year around capturing cabling and conduits, and this was specifically for S&W-Spec. And as you can see from the question, it's, do we just provide it as one asset? And what I outlined to the data provider was that these assets are more than likely managed separately in the event of repairs or replacement, as I've put on the screen, but also recorded in the asset register separately. So that was one question that came up from the industry. Now I want to outline here that this is we're actually reversing a decision, and this was made by us last year to remove the unique ID, and because we had the unique number associated with the point object. right? However, we made the error that the unique ID is for that particular object that is, so this is a polygon for the access point, and this access point number is the number for the point object that's created for that access point. So that way, all of the polygons could be processed, and then they're linked to the point object by this AP_NO attribute field. So we are reversing our initial decision to remove unique number from this particular table. Okay, so I just want to, so Greg, thanks for the statement. What's the point of having multiple standards like it seems it currently is with 2019 and 2023? So one of the reasons that we do have multiple standards is to enable the asset owners to transition across to the new standard. We provide or we typically recommend a 6-month changeover. Now it's well and truly past the 6 months because we're now in 2025 and the last update was in 2023. However, it's not mandatory for the asset owners to change to 2019, and we do follow up to find out why they're still on 2019. We don't know exactly where everybody is at with that, but for the most part, we know that people are on 2023, and we find that out from talking to the industry about what data they're delivering. So, so I don't know if that answers your question completely, Greg. It may not be a satisfactory answer, but that's our comment to that. If you want to put in a follow-up, don't hesitate to do that. Now, one of the things that has come up throughout the forums is how do I apply to capital works projects? So I've had a look at this from a water and sewer perspective. So this, so I'm going to go down this path and give you an example of what we did with Central Coast Council when we were supporting them with implementing A-SPEC there. And Central Coast Council, even though they're a council in New South Wales, a number of councils have responsibility for water and wastewater, and in this particular case, Central Coast Council is subscribing to S&W-Spec. So there's two aspects to it. So first off, we always advocate identify what the project is. Are we talking about a relining, or are we talking about a renewal or reconstruction? Because it has two separate aspects. So if we talk about the relining feature, well, you know, typically from a relining, you already know where the asset is. So what you're looking at doing is updating the details about that particular pipe. So which would include the relining or renewal method, the relining or renewal material, and maybe there's a reference for a CCTV activity that's occurred. So from that perspective, the organisation adopting the specs would then receive details about the updates to those particular attribute fields. From a asset realigned or an asset new resulting out of a capital works project, it's about identifying what are all the assets that are going to be delivered as part of that. So again, we've got complete the checklist in both aspects because it's about creating certainty about what is going to be delivered in terms of data. So we're linking the checklist. It's the asset and asset data handover checklist. So we're linking specifically for the data requirements. So as you can see in the bottom box, capture the location and provide the attributes. And again, it's about once you know what's in that project and once you know what's going to be delivered, then you can address that. So I'm going to go into a bit more detail here, and so in this particular instance, what we're talking about is, so here's a typical capital works process workflow. Okay, I'm sure that you'd all be familiar with this. One of the key things that we find is that we get pushback from the project managers, from the authorities. So, well, we can't, we've got no budget line item to do data capture. And so we say to them, well, can't you put it into the scoping phase so that it's all part of the preparation of what this project will provide? And that is not just the asset that's going to be handed over, but also the data associated with the asset. And if you put that in as a budget line item and assess it when the responses come back from RFQs or RFTs, then you know that you've got that the contractor has taken into account that there's going to be data capture required. So that's the first thing that we look at. Now I'm about to show you some workflows that we've created, and specifically for water and sewer. And in this particular case, we look at 3 phases. So we look at the impact that A-SPEC has on the project assessment, we look at the build and delivery phase, and then the sign off and handover phase. And in the blue at the bottom of that, it's, so we're looking at the inputs and outputs, we're looking at the communication, we're looking at the actions and responsibilities and the reinforcement, and yes, and communication. That's a very big part of it. For the most part, most of you that have been engaging with me over the years, or even just recently, will know that I mostly talk about go and have a conversation with someone. If you're not certain about what needs to be delivered, have a conversation with someone. What I mentioned earlier about the going to the A-SPEC proposed changes page. On that page, there's also a document there that has a listing of all of the subscribers, subscribers to A-SPEC and which specifications they subscribe to. And in some cases, there is a direct A-SPEC email address that you can use for clarification. So, that will just be updated over time. There's a new one to be released. It'll probably be later this afternoon. Now, when we start looking at communicating the requirements, we want to have a look at, putting it up front. Let's not be blasé about it. We want to make sure that there are some key activities here. So you can see that A-SPEC appears in a lot of these boxes. Now, for the most part, it's about communicating that requirement and, tying it in with things like the checklist, who's responsible for the checklist? When does it get updated? How does it, the checklist is not something that you do at the start of a project and that's the end of it. It's a living document, or it can be used as a living document. And in this particular case, it would be the responsibility of the authority to commence it, and then as the project progresses, be updated between the authority and also the consultant. So you can also see that there's responsibility about communicating the A-SPEC requirements. We don't expect that the project review team will know very much about A-SPEC, or that the PMs putting these electrical projects together will know very much about A-SPEC. So it's about linking it to a focal point, and the focal point is often the asset management team, and that's what it is in this particular case. So that was in the assessing the project. So whilst we're still assessing the project, when it goes out to quote, it's about identifying what the requirements are. And as you can see, there's a box that we've linked to GISA here, where we will always provide support and advice to the external provider as much as what we do for the internal providers. Now, what I've got circled here is these 3 ticks, and it says add to gate. The council is using a project management framework, and they've added that particular hold point to their gate, so as part of their project. So I think that might be gate 1 or gate 2. So it's important to see how the workflow progresses. Now, for the most part, all of these activities occurred. We just looked at how A-SPEC fits into it. So, because we're heading towards delivery. In this case, it's called work as executed drawings, but it's the same as constructed data, because that's the goal. So when we get to this point of delivering the data, practical completion, there is a requirement for it to be validated. And again, this comes back to identifying which team it is, not the individual, but the team. And as you can see, again, it's part of the project management framework because it's linked to one of the gates there. And so essentially, we're looking at addressing data compliance prior to sign off. And one of the key hold points is here, where the data is to be reviewed, and it goes back to the PM, and then the PM issues the certificate of practical completion, so the project then moves on into the defects liability period. So essentially, that's how we see the capital works process incorporating A-SPEC. There's a number of touch points. There's quite an extensive level of communication required, and that way we can progress with it. So from a data governance perspective, or from a governance perspective, we talk about 3 areas: data, process, communication. I've just shown you an example of communication. If you're not familiar with this, I request you become familiar with it. This is the overview document. Actually, this is not the overview document. This is, my apologies for that. I've actually got the wrong, oh no. Let's wind that back. Got myself completely confused. There is an overview document that we have created, which is a companion document and is to be read in conjunction with the specifications. So within this document, what you'll find is details about the responsibility of the developer, the consultant, the surveyor, etc., etc. And one of the key things is that you'll see this second bottom in the top phase, responsibility of the developer, consultant, and this is the same in all of them. The second bottom point is ensuring the data is supplied within 15 working days of work being completed unless otherwise agreed with the relevant consortium member. So again, communication. From a consortium member's responsibility or a subscriber's responsibility, we have the same requirement. We've identified at the bottom about the number of working days, if there are developments, for the authority to get back to the consultant, and for capital works. And again, a note, please note this will be dependent upon project size and as agreed to with the consultant. So we are encouraging you to have conversations. The asset and asset data handover checklist is also part of the process. So from a subdivision development perspective or a capital works perspective, it can be utilised to identify what assets are going to be delivered and what data is expected to be delivered, and which of those assets will have data associated with them. There's a point for a sign-off, and why we reinforce this is that, again, it's what data is expected at practical completion. And this provides an opportunity for both parties to sign off on that. So if it's capital works and the authority creates the list, the consultant can sign off. And if it's a development, subdivision development, the consultant, the developer creates a list, and then the authority can sign off on that. So that way there's some checks and balances in place. Big tip, inspect versus expect. And again, linking it back to the asset and asset data handover checklist. This is part of a project that we were involved with Central Coast Council in putting an RFT out to upgrade a water treatment plant. And we supported the council by creating this checklist that was then formed part of an addendum that was with the RFT, and this provided the consultants with access to what was expected of them, and it also triggered the potential question of what the heck is this A-SPEC thing, and then gave them an opportunity to follow that up. So this is our next Menti. Really keen. We've been running this poll throughout the forums, and we've been running it for a couple of years now. And I was very pleased. Last week we ran A-SPEC, and last year we had an 11 zip response, with 11 being no and zip being yes. And last week I was very happy because we shifted it and it became 10-1. So we either had the same participants responding, or it just occurred that way. So it's great that we're getting some yeses there, and there's still some no's, and that's okay. The purpose of bringing it up was to remind you that there is that particular opportunity to use a checklist to know exactly what is going to be delivered or expected to be delivered. So this poll is still live. Feel free to go in and respond to it. And look, and I'm also interested in people who have responded yes. What's been their experience of using the checklist? So feel free to take yourself off mute. I'm just reading Greg's follow-up question. Greg, I'll deal with that in the wrap-up, and Kelly, if you can remind me to deal with that, that would be great. Another thing that we're looking at is, there's the ongoing issue that we are asked, how do we know if what has been built is what's been designed or varies from design? So one of the things that we always advocate as part of creating those workflows that I showed you is that we already know that construction supervisors typically record all the changes, and there is a register. Some councils have a register, some authorities just have a note on file. It's important to pass that level of detail on. What we are asking and requesting is that the organisation who is tasked with providing or whose tasked with the requirement to provide as constructed data, not necessarily the surveyor, but the authority who's received the permit condition or received the contract, that they document the changes that have occurred in that project, okay, that have been signed off. So, you know, as can be seen on the example, if there's changes to the invert or the length or gradient, etc., etc. You know, it might be that there's an access point that's been omitted, but it's still showing up in the data. Unless we know those kind of changes, then can only deal with things on face value. Other activities. Digital Hive is a joint venture partnership with Whereabouts Consulting, and we do a lot of projects such as gap analysis, comparisons between, you know, asset management data models and the A-SPEC data models. We develop things like we called it A-SPEC Warehouse, which is like a holding database to enable analysis before incorporating into other systems. So that's one of the remits of Digital Hive, as well as delivering training. We also have a joint venture with One Spatial through our Digital Hive entity on this particular tool. Now, just before I get to our fireside chat, here's where it all began. So it started off as a data capture process for Wyndham City Council, and this goes back to 2002. Now, as a result of that, we created this data capture document for our staff to follow, and that evolved into the first specification. So it was launched on 21st of October in 2004. So as you've been seeing on the slides, it's our 21st birthday this year. So, you know, we'll blow a few balloons, throw a few streamers, you know, party poppers, that sort of thing. But as you can see, this very first document had 37 pages. So we've evolved from one document with 4 councils, and 3 of which are now still utilising the spec of those initial 4, to this group of specifications. And essentially A-SPEC being the latest one, which I'll talk about in the wrap-up. So that completes my update for you. So apologies, Brendan and Brenton, I was a minute over. So so now we get to Kelly. Did you want to introduce the gents, or we just have them provide a little intro of where they're at and what?
I think actually, George, you should address Greg's comment around mandatory accept new as standard after a period of time.
Yep. Yeah, I'm going to address that in the wrap-up.
Oh, okay. Then I would think that Brendan and Brett could introduce themselves. It's pretty casual.
Yeah, cool.
So over to you guys.
Okay, so welcome, you know, Brendan and Brenton. You know, looking forward to our chat. So before we, so the intention, just to set the scene, is to have a conversation with Brendan and Brenton about some of the asset management improvement activities through asset data improvements embraced at the regional level. So we're going to go back a little bit in time to, because these two were the architects of the regional approach between the Wannon Water and Warrnambool. So we get a chance to speak to them about that. But first things first, Brendan, because you're first alphabetically before Brenton. I'll get you to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, George. So yeah, I'm Brenton McDonald. If I haven't met you before, so I started at Warrnambool City Council probably 14 years ago, and it was there for 10 years. When I started, it was D-SPEC, like that slide George did just show. And I was brought in part-time to digitize all the old drainage plans from PDFs or various sources. Then this thing called D-SPEC come along, and I was told that I wouldn't have to keep digitizing, georeferencing PDFs and tracing over pipes. I was like, oh, this is going to be awesome. And it was a long journey. I think it took 5 years or so to get it over the line. So we partnered with Wannon to help standardize our implementation approach. Over that time, D-SPEC evolved into the suite and A-SPEC, and I've since moved to Wannon, and I guess now more familiar with S-SPEC and W-SPEC, but with the benefit of, I guess, being familiar with the standards, with GISA, George, Brenton, our review process, so those diagrams George was talking about, so that made that transition easy. It feels like, not a lot has really changed. They're all pipes and an attribute table behind it. So that's my background.
Yeah, my name's Brenton O'Rourke. I know a few names there in the attendees list. I began at Wannon Water in 2011. Left Wannon Water in 2021, 22, and moved into the private sector, obviously from the public side of things, and took on a role in the civil construction space, all driven from a desire to find out more about why data isn't used better in the implementation phase. It very much a focus on the where aspect, with the what accompanying that, and that really drove me to explore the space, I guess, at the coalface where all this work happens, and then we are recording information in regards to that. I was heavily involved with Brendan and George through the implementation of A-SPEC within Wannon Water and the region. So it's been a very interesting career path, and the last 3 to 4 years have really expanded my understanding of how what we all do impacts not only our internal parties when I was within the public sector, but the expectations, the capabilities, and the deliverable aspect of applying this in the field.
Sorry, I had myself off mute. I was talking to myself. So thank you both for that brief intro. Now, Brenton, I'm going to start with you. You stated you were formerly at Wannon and now you're in the private sector. So tell us a bit about what it's like on the dark side.
It's very enjoyable. Sun's out yesterday. Today, hands-on, very much delivering projects. Just for a bit of background to that, the main project that I come on board with Civil Now for was the delivery of the Port Campbell streetscape upgrade, a $15.8 million job that I was asked to assist with and ended up running. The importance of data and quality of data was in that particular job brought to front and centre. We were given issued for tender, not construction drawings to build the job with. The accompanying digital data that was supplied to actually build the job was a collection of disparate designs from various architects that had been involved along the way and nothing tied in. So to be able to deliver that job and then bring it to a point which we're compiling as constructed data for now was extremely difficult. So to go from the public sector with beliefs on how data should be managed, should be captured, to then go to the dark side and realise the pressures and the expectations that the private sector are under to not only deliver works but capture data and supply that too, was a very much a jump in the deep end side of things. We've moved through a couple of different jobs, moved on from that job after sort of getting it to 80%, moved on to a disabled beach access ramp job that was valued at $500,000 that had A-SPEC as a component deliverable. So again, delivering that works to a design and then supplying the data has its challenges. You try and build the design to millimetre perfect, but people are people and mistakes are made throughout the build and you have to work through things. So there's some interesting components to that, and people right through from private to the public sector project managers in managing the job and the accuracy of the data that they would like versus what they're given. And that can expose decisions that are made during the flight of a project from their behalf, not only the contractor. So there's some interesting learnings there. And currently we're working on a footpath in Casterton, an asphalt footpath that won't have an A-SPEC component, but currently has been built as per the design.
Cool. Thank you for that. So I applaud you for your restraint on talking about the disparate data. Must be very frustrating to being on that side.
It is. It's an interesting sort of element to all of this is the people element and people, having jobs and work, and the talk of AI and things like that. And there is the ability to automate and change process from the start of the process so that you are closer to the design at the end of the process. But the changes there are more of a people focus rather than sometimes a data, which is something that I'm learning rapidly about.
Cool. Well, thank you for that. So, Brendan, you started at council, you moved to a water authority. Can you share with us a bit about what that transition's been like for you?
Nowhere near as stark as Brenton's move to the private sector. Quite smooth. The standard approach, like I said, pipes are pipes. Moving from being responsible for the asset register and the spatial data for infrastructure back at Wannon City. Same responsibilities with Wannon, but taken on the non-asset spatial elements as well, like the cadastre and mapping, that sort of thing. So very slight shift there. Biggest change is probably the level of detail Wannon componentize their treatment plants and facilities down to. It is really down to the nuts and bolts, the doors, tanks, that sort of thing within a site, whereas Wannon City was just the building footprint, and then their building components were all non-spatial as a bit of a register in a database. So that was a bit like, wow, look at this level of detail. Due to that, we haven't adopted any of the A-SPEC chapters. I guess B-SPEC would be the closest for treatment plants or anything like that. We're like, oh, it doesn't quite fit our need. So, George, we've discussed a few times what that might look like. So yeah, we've just retained the water and sewer for our network assets. So that allows us to have the great topology and be able to do network traces and those strict business rules for that. So it's really embedded in our process. So those are quite valuable. It's easy and valuable for us to get the data in that format. That's straight into GIS.
Yep. Cool.
So yeah, improvements there maybe for future when it comes to buildings and treatment plants.
A work in progress, Brendan.
Yeah, yep. But otherwise, similarities and differences still sit beside our capital works delivery team that happened in both agencies. Being aware of the land development process, permit conditions, requirements of SOC, that sort of thing. Quite similar internal review processes that goes through our asset information review and spatial review, and we ground truth a few points. Then it goes off to the either the PM or the land development services people to review, like you say, the comparison between issue for construction or design and ASCON. So yeah, very similar processes. So yeah, that was my experience with moving between the two.
Cool. Great. So, you both have a common connection through A-SPEC and addressing the regional approach, and this question is for both of you. So, so what kind of goals were set by each of your organizations at the time?
I guess I can lead the way from a Wannon water perspective. That's where I was obviously working at the time. The goal was to have strength and unity, predominantly to support the improvement to our data capture process to ensure that we were getting the data we needed to maintain assets into the future. The community, the A-SPEC community, the underlying standard provided a platform to be able to gather people into a room and provide clear direction. We've discussed things where the standards do morph over time to improve and to refine and enable capture of assets that once maybe were not considered to be worth capturing. But the underlying principle is consistent. It's a consistent message. I leave, I go to the dark side. Fortunately for Wannon Water, Brenton comes in and he's very familiar with the process, having hand in hand implemented it regionally. But if it was a third party that was coming in and may not have had to promote these or have an understanding of the standards themselves, and they need to continue that process, they have a document and a foundation that is stable.
Cool. Brendan, from your end, from council end?
Yeah, from council back in the day, it was a couple of things. The efficiency of having someone at a desk digitising PDF plans was not a great use of time when they would have originally started as some sort of electronic form, a CAD drawing of sorts. So an improvement in efficiency there, an improvement in data quality as well, because every development officer would be asking for, what's an ASCON, would get plans with, like Brenton said, it's just the location, pipe on a page. Some would want diameters or material, nothing standard. So that was the other outcome was, that standardized approach. Doesn't matter who you're talking to within council, you know what you're going to get asked for. And continuing on, the evolution of that was being able to review and check data quality. So verify, we weren't getting the IFCs given back to us just with a stamp on it that said ASCONs, that it allowed us better comparison between the two. And the collaboration approach with the rollout between Wannon and Warrnambool City helped with the onboarding of all of our contractors, the messaging, training, support, all of that. And council actually struggled for some time just because being a small town, everyone sort of knows everyone. It's a bit of a, let's let that requirement slide this time. There's sort of no teeth with permits. Council laws are very accessible if you do want to sway decisions. So we needed the support of Wannon to help say, no, we're line in the sand. This is how we're approaching it. So that was our benefit of partnering up for the implementation of A-SPEC. And I think, now there might have been teething issues like any change management, but it's quite embedded in us, Warrnambool City, and our contractors, and we're still onboarding the odd new consultant every now and then as well.
Yeah, great. So thank you both. So can you share with us some of the maybe tricks and traps that you may have encountered during your journeys? What would you say to people out there who are looking to embark on similar kind of approach?
From my perspective, and it hasn't wavered from my time in public and transferring to the private, is that the as constructed drawing is not a tool to assess the quality of the build or to go back and hash problems with the construction. It's the corporation or the authority's responsibility to monitor the progress of the job throughout and ensure that it is compliant through the stages of the build. The worst thing that I got exposed to my time at Wannon Water, the as constructed was used as a sort of the final check to ensure that the job was done right. And in event, what would transpire would be that the first submission was what was built and what was eventually accepted. Nothing was ever made to be redug up and replaced or changed. But with internal tick box processes, you would end up with just the design plan after 11 iterations. And it's as true today as it ever was. Is that I sort of alluded to it before? Is that people make mistakes through that's just human nature. Everybody does, and if you don't think you make mistakes, you're kidding yourself. You just don't want to make big ones. That's my instruction in what I do. Catch the big ones and deal with the little ones. And that's not just the contractor, that's the project manager employed by jurisdictions at the time. And they potentially don't want things to get across the table of somebody that's going to tap on a piece of paper and say this isn't right and make a big song and dance out of it. It could very well be functional, just like we looked at that report that George had up earlier that said, accepted by ABC Water Authority. That is okay. Numbers and things like that, as long as they're functional and approved by the appropriate engineer and things like that, it's more than fine. So the biggest thing for me is that if you get a job that comes in and your ASCON is a mirror image of your design, that's not correct. I'm sorry to say. It doesn't matter what they build, where they build it. It doesn't matter what builder's building it, what construction company's doing the civil works. The design is the foundation, and the outcome, providing it's functional and it's going to meet its design life, is the result. And your ASCON needs to be reflective of the result and not the design. Because when it comes to me doing job in 5 years' time and I get a dial before you dig, and the process has changed the as constructed back to the design plan, I'm going to dig up your asset because it's not going to be where it was built. And that's ultimately, trying to put it in a nutshell, the life cycle of why good data is imperative. It could save a life.
Thanks, Brenton. Very wise words. Brendan, anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, a couple of different takes. I'll double that what Brenton said around the ASCONs shouldn't match. You know, if it's outside of tolerance, that's fine. That's not the spot where you fix it. You don't want people to go back and fudge the numbers just so it passes through our QA checks. Like, no, if that's what it is, that's what it is. Whatever. So after getting people okay with that, we started to see a lot of headway. Back on your slide, George, where you've separated a relining project and a replacement project, internally, we're starting to change some of our terminology. So we're trying not to refer to them as ASCONs anymore, that ASCONs mean different things to different people. We first transitioned to as constructed data, and now we're going to asset information requirements, which was a phrase we picked up from VDAS, the Victorian Digital Asset Strategy. So that's where we go and have those discussions with the PM, with the client, with everyone to say, these are our asset information requirements. If it is a relining project, we don't need S-SPEC. We don't need you to go and GPS all the pits. We know where they are. You're not changing those locations. The asset information requirements become a subset of your pipe list, relining material, relining date, whatever those 4 attributes are. And we can get that through a spreadsheet. That's fine. So we're starting to change that terminology. There's no point giving us exactly the same data of where our pipes are for that sort of thing. So we are trying to get ourselves in at the start of projects and scoping and understanding what's involved in this project. Is there water involved? Is there sewer involved? Is there facility? That sort of thing. So yeah, asset information requirements is what we're starting to call it all. Some of the things that you mentioned throughout the presentation, George, I was already going to say was, if in doubt of anything with A-SPEC or the standards, reach out to George, Gissa, or ourselves. I'll have to go double check that contact page and see what the details there are. Because there's been a number of times, and I think, you did already use my example of trying to interpret the standards, and I come with you to say, hey, what was the intent here, or how am I interpreting this? Are we all interpreting it the same way? And if there was doubt, we changed the wording to make it consistent. And I also noted a picture is worth 1,000 words. So if anyone does have examples of these different asset classes to contribute to the standards, like those conduit photos and the trenching, shoot them through, because that helps everyone understand what's below the ground. That's now my tips.
Okay, cool. Well, look, thank you both very much for making the time available during your day. Brenton, I know you need to shoot off and get onto the project, see what the team's been up to in your absence. So again, I want to.
That's exactly where these decision trees occur, when you're not there given the oversight and something gets decided upon, and maybe very well a change to the as constructed versus the design.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so thanks again, very much appreciated, and thank you both for the time and your contributions. And also personally, I want to thank you for, I had the pleasure of meeting you both for the first time when you're looking at a regional approach, and it was very easy to work with you. So thank you for that as well. So moving on into our wrap up, and so we've talked about crowdsourcing for codes, the API is under construction, we talked about continuous improvement, A-SPEC, we'll talk about the formats, and ask us anything. I just want to spend just 20 seconds on this. Each Thursday, leading up to the forums and then post the forums, we have an Ask Us Anything session. It starts at 11 a.m. Melbourne time, goes for half an hour. I am on there. If you think of anything, if you're working on a project, if you want to be cheeky and get some free consulting, jump on. I'll be there for half an hour to answer any specific questions you might have. Okay, A-SPEC. We're nearing completion of the draft for A-SPEC. It's in the A-SPEC structure as it is, with diagrams, etc. We're looking at other things. We're not specifying what the separation distances are in this, as shown on this slide. What we're doing is indicating what is required as part of the AS standards or Australian standards. We've settled on a set of draft attributes at the moment with their descriptions. They will be, once we finalise this document, and I'm anticipating it'll be the end of September, then we'll distribute it for comment, and we'll see how we go. Now, as we finish off, we've got a few more polls, so I request you stay with us until the end if you can. So next week we finish with our showcase with a strong focus on AI and digital engineering. So we've got a pretty good lineup there. And again, please use the QR code if you haven't registered for the showcase. It goes for 2 hours as opposed to an hour and a half. So here's the first of the 4 polls. Please log in or access it via your smart device to do your rating, please. Kelly, there seems to be a number of features missing there, or is that my slide?
No, it's not your slide. I think you just kind of, on the phone, you have a slider and you slide your...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's from 1 to 10. I say rate 1 to 5, but it's actually 0 to 10. So
that's interesting.
if it's all the way to the right, then George, someone has given you a 10. That's insane. Who would do that?
Yes, I know. Go figure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. So these are still going. So again, the same thing. Let's do, oh, look at that, the slider. Oh, that wasn't a very good slide. Okay. Thank you. 4 people, 5 people have responded. Please jump on and do it. Very important that we get this kind of feedback. It gives us a sense of whether we're on track. Plus, you know, this fireside chat, as I've called it, is something new that we want to include in future forums as well. Gives us a break from just death by PowerPoint. Cool. So
I like the fireside chats, actually, George.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Kelly. So let's see. I know with some of the people that are on that they're probably their first year is fairly early, which is great. So please type this in when you can, and we'll progress to the next one.
There's only like 2 or 3, so
yep.
You know.
Yeah, great. 2016, awesome. 2023, great. 2014, love it. Yes, there's some very familiar names there. Awesome. When it first arrived in WA. Oh, that's around 2007, 2008, I think. Great. Thank you very much. Beautiful. I'll just progress to the next slide, bearing in mind that we are 3 minutes over our scheduled finish. Will be another 2 minutes for everybody. Information. If you need to go, please don't hesitate to go, but we're almost there. I did say that I would talk about Greg's comment, and look, apologies for leaving it so late. Greg, I'm going to take that on board, and I'm going to canvass it with all the participants of the and subscribers to the forums to say what's going to be the impact for only requiring 2023. So that's what I will take on, and I'll take that on by the end of September, so that's communicated out to the to all of the subscribers. Okay, so this brings us to the end of our forum and the end of our forum series. Next week we have the showcase. Kelly, thank you. Always a pleasure doing these with you. We have a bit of fun and a bit of banter to and fro. Thank you for everyone who came on a bit earlier and participated in some online networking. I want to acknowledge Brendan, and Brenton is gone now, but Brendan and Brenton for their time and their contributions and their sage words. Very valuable to get that kind of feedback from who we consider stakeholders for this community. In fact, you're all stakeholders. You know, all your feedback is much appreciated. So on that note, I'm signing off. I'll be here for a few more minutes. However, enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to get out and enjoy this Melbourne sunshine as the temperature skyrockets to about 16, and and enjoy the day.